and encourage the girls up there. There we go. We got sound now. So you can go up that direction before we get good and started here. A lot of our families will be going to Nashville starting tomorrow and then on Friday for the Last Leader event. And several are planning, I think, to stay over even through Sunday. And so there'll be some of us will be missing on Sunday morning. And yet I think probably because of the Easter weekend, it's kind of normal for folks to come in from out of town and so on, so there probably may be a lot of extra folks here as well. But we want to encourage our young folks the best that we can, and we are very proud of them and the good work that they are doing, very proud of those who are helping and encouraging them as well. Kind of coming not far from the weekend that we're about to go into is May 11th, which May 11th is our Girls' Day. And a lot of the ladies have been working very diligently on getting the Girls' Day ready and prepared, and we appreciate them very much for all the good work that they're doing. And we look forward to the good impact that will have on our young ladies who will be attending that, not only from this congregation, but from many other places as well. And busy congregation before that. On the first weekend of May, we have our teacher workshop, Impact, Impress, and Implant, and we do want to encourage you to be a part of that. And if you're in the teaching program, you want to be in the teaching program, you want to encourage those who are in the teaching program, then we encourage you to be a part of that Saturday on May the 3rd, and then Matt Cook will be with us, and he'll be with us on Sunday, May the 4th as well, presenting on the morning time some good thoughts and some good encouragement to us as teachers. You probably figured out by now that I'm not Lonnie Jones, but I've got the beard, I've got the bald head, but I don't have the brain. So Lonnie, this is the other time he was going to be out of pocket. He'll be continuing this class through the end of May, through the last Wednesday in May. And this should be the only other time, the last time that he'll be away from class. And so I was asked to fill in tonight, not by Lonnie. He was smarter than that. But I was asked if I could take the class this evening. So what we're going to do tonight is spend a little bit of time thinking about Jesus and some of the things that he did in counseling techniques and working with people and dealing with people, and kind of take it from that perspective. I unlike Lonnie, am not a professional counselor. I don't have a master's degree in that. I have some coursework in it in my master's program and in my undergraduate program. I've done some non-professional counseling here and there, but certainly nothing to the level that he has been bringing to us each time we have been meeting for this class. But I thought it might be helpful and beneficial for all of us to think just a little bit about how Jesus dealt with people, because a lot of the things that Lonnie has been going over for us in regard to the kinds of problems that people have physically, emotionally, mentally, and otherwise. A lot of those things, are universal. And you find that in every culture, and you find that across the board, across time. It's not something that's just been discovered. It's not something that's just new and relevant to the last 50 years or anything like that, or even the last couple of centuries. We understand that people have had problems, people have had issues, people have needed someone to guide them, to help them, to probe their minds and hearts, and to help them with that insight into how to make their life better for the future and prepare them for the future. Of course, Jesus has a one-up on everybody about that, because John chapter 2 tells us that Jesus did not need to ask what was going on about any situation. Why? Because John 2, about verse 24 and 25 says that he knew what was in man. Man, wouldn't you like to have that for like 10 minutes? Just to know what was going on inside of some people sometimes. But Jesus had that ability to know everything that was going on in someone's mind. He knew their background, he knew their baggage, he knew their luggage, he knew what they were dealing with presently, and the steps that needed to be taken to encourage that person, to help that person, and bless that person as they moved forward, because that's the goal of all things about moving forward. And before we look at that, I've got several little items here about how Jesus dealt with people, and Jesus, I guess, as a counselor. Let's stop and think for just a moment here, though, about the opportunities that you and I have as non-professionals from the counseling standpoint, the opportunities that we have to work with people and deal with people. And, you know, in the strictest sense, the most technical sense, we don't have opportunities, I guess, to counsel people like a professional counselor would or a licensed counselor would. But we all have opportunities at one time or another to talk with people who are working through some of life's problems. And we have opportunities to share our experiences and to share our insights to hopefully help and bless those people. You think about the elders of this congregation and the many opportunities they have to help us as sheep, you know, as shepherds, and to help us as sheep to talk with us and to share their spiritual wisdom and knowledge with us to help us as we move forward and we kind of sort through some of the problems that we may be dealing with currently. You know, that's not in a professional sense like a licensed counselor or anything, but it happens. You think about an employer on the job. You think about a supervisor on the job, positions that many of you hold. You think about being a school teacher. You think about being someone who has influence over a group of people or maybe is in charge of a group of people. You have opportunities there to talk with people about what's going on in their lives. And when those people are having problems, how that's being manifested, you know, at school, on the job, in the church, so on and so forth, in the home, in the neighborhood. You have opportunities to talk with those people and hopefully be a blessing to those individuals by sharing some spiritual wisdom with them. And we take our cue, of course, from Jesus, thinking about how he dealt with people to help us deal with people. Let me share a couple of things with you. I went back through some of my notes from many years ago, and in one of my classes, we did have a little blurb about what counseling is not. You know, what counseling is not. And this is a little bit from the standpoint of somebody who's preparing to be maybe a counselor and taking a counseling courses for a counseling degree. But as we think about listening to people and trying to help people, you know, on the non-professional basis, just as a fellow Christian, as a fellow man, as somebody who has compassion and empathy and wants to listen to someone and maybe to offer help. Here's some things that it's not. Counseling is not giving advice. You know, there's times we give advice. You know, cooking. You know, different things like that. You give advice about things like that. But strictly speaking, counseling is not giving advice. Lonnie Jones does not sit in his office when he counsels people and give them advice. You know, that's not what he does. That's not the point. That's not the purpose. Also, counseling is not assuming responsibility from them. We don't try to do it for them. We maybe objectively speaking can recognize the problem. But because this person is knee deep, waist deep, or earlobe deep, or maybe eyebrow deep in the problem, they can't see it like we can, objectively, from the outside looking in. And sometimes we just want to rescue, you know, we want to help that person, we want to do it for them, don't we? Because we say this is how it could be done very easily. We want to do that for them. And we assume responsibility from them, but what we don't need to do it for them. Because when they have another problem, will they be able to help themselves any better than they could have before? We set them up for failure in the future if we just do it for them. And kind of along that line, counseling is not, you know, playing the rescuer. I'm not the hero when I try to solve everybody's problems. And you know, sometimes we talk about people who think they have all the answers. And when I say that little phrase, probably somebody came to your mind, or somebody you've dealt with, you know, this person thinks he or she has all the answers. And it's probably not a real favorable impression that you have when you visualize that person, is it? Because this person thinks he or she has all the answers. Well, sometimes they do have a good answer here or there. But the longer I have lived, the more I have learned that those people who think they have all the answers rarely even know most of the questions, especially my questions. But they think they can solve them for me. And so with that in mind, counseling is not a magic cure. It's not like you go to, and again, on the professional level, it's not like you go to a professional and, he gives you some kind of magic voodoo juice and suddenly, boom, you're magically healed of all the problems and everything goes away and nothing ever bothers you again. Here's the deal. Most of the time when we have problems that bring us to the level that we're having trouble dealing with life, as Lonnie has been doing the last week or so, talking about trauma, when we've had past traumas that continue to pound on us and affect us and challenge us in the way we deal with life and the way we deal with individuals and the way we deal with even our own self. When we have trauma like that, it's very rare that we have gotten into those problems overnight. It's usually something that's happened over a period of time. So if it is the case that we don't get into problems overnight, guess what? We're not going to get out of them overnight either. It is a process that will often take time for us to work through with the guidance of someone that we trust and someone who has wisdom and insight both into matters of psychology and how the brain works, but able to weave into all of that the spiritual principles that we find in Scripture that God has given us to help us cope and handle and deal with life. So there are two very important things. And again, this is what a professional counselor does, but as I said here at the outset, we all have opportunities to talk to neighbors, to coworkers, to employees, to people at school, to people on a sports team, on and on we could go with that list, people that we have influence over. And there are two real key things. Number one is listening, and number two is empathy. We need to listen to people. Whether we're a professional or we're dealing with somebody on a non-professional basis, we need to have this ability to listen to people, and then we need to have this ability to empathize with people. And when we put those two things together about listening and empathy, we begin building relationship. And so often, the problems that we deal with in life are far more exacerbated and complicated by the fact that we don't have a good relationship with our parents, our spouse, our siblings, our neighbors, our coworkers, people we go to church with, on and on the list goes. And so we've got to help these people develop a relationship where there's trust and there's listening and there's empathy, so that as they proceed forward, they can kind of fan that out to where they begin to have those relationships with family, with neighbors, with coworkers, with people at school. And it can kind of begin, from the inside and work itself out. By listening, when people come to us with their problems, again, this person is in the middle of the problem. So it's very hard to be objective about it. Very hard to see what the problem is objectively when you're the one who is waist deep or earlobe deep or eyebrow deep in the problem. I can look at you from the outside and kind of tick off a list of, well, here's some choices you made, and here's some things you said, and here's some relationships that you had that weren't healthy, and that's why you're in this problem. I can stand out here and say that and see that. But the person who is sinking deeper and deeper into the mire and into the muck of the problem has a harder and harder time seeing that. And sometimes it comes down to a case of maybe they saw it at one point, but things are so bad now, they just want to pretend like that didn't happen. And so that's unrealistic. So we're failing to face reality. So we want to listen to people who are like that and objectively listen to them. But listening to them, listening, here's the simplest definition of listening: not talking. Okay? That's the simplest definition I know. Listening is what? Not talking. And when someone is opening their heart, opening their life, opening their experiences and their problems with us, we need to listen with our whole self. It's their agenda. This is their go-kart. They need to steer it. And we need to let them steer it. Now, you ask questions here and there. You probe a little bit here and there. You say, well, what happened after that? Can you tell me a little more about how that made you feel? Where were you when that was said? And you ask those probing questions to elicit more verbiage from the person who's having the problem. And so listening is not talking. We sometimes the best answer is silence, because we want to encourage people to think. For instance, and we won't delve deeply into this. We're thinking about how Jesus dealt with people. We'll get to it in just a second. But how Jesus dealt with people. When in John 8, when the woman caught in adultery was brought to Jesus, he suddenly had a double situation there, didn't he? He had to deal with the accusers, and he had to deal with the woman. So it's working on two levels there. And notice he dealt with the accusers first, and then he dealt with the woman. But as the accusers kept railing and shouting and trying to do all these things, of course, they're trying to set Jesus up for entrapment and so on. But as the accusers are doing all that, what did Jesus say to them? Absolutely nothing. In that case, the best answer was silence. Now it says he wrote on the ground, and you can read all kinds of speculations about what he wrote, but what he wrote's not important. It's the fact that his behavior was, I'm going to listen to you, but I'm not going to respond to you, because this is not a healthy environment we're in right now. You're not here to learn or to hear or to be helped. You're here to hurt. And so he dealt, and finally, when he did speak, let the one without sin cast the first stone, he set their wheels to turning, and they started thinking for themselves, and then pretty soon they were all gone. Now he's dealt with that level. Then he deals with the woman. And he talks with her. And so we want to keep someone talking, if we can, because we want to listen. That means we give them our full attention. We listen with our whole self. We're not distracted. We're not, if somebody's talking to me about a personal problem, somebody has trusted you enough to give you a little piece of their heart, a little piece of their life, a little piece of the problems they're experiencing, and you're listening, and as you're listening to that person, you're like, and you're doing this. You've lost them, and rightfully so. We listen with our whole self. We invest our whole self in that person because that person has trusted us enough to share something very personal with us. And so we want to block out any distractions and anything that communicates that I'm not listening, because really what that communicates is that I really don't care what you're saying. It's really not that important to me. And we just don't want to do that. So we listen with our full attention, we listen very respectfully, and we try to hear feelings as well as facts, which is the hard thing to do sometimes. And so we're trying to listen with empathy. There's empathy and there's sympathy. Sympathy is not a negative thing by any means, but empathy is maybe just a level deeper to where we are, sympathy, we hurt with someone and we hurt for sympathy is where we hurt for someone. Empathy is where we hurt with someone, because we're trying to empathize with them. And that may not be a really absolutely technical definition, but that's kind of a distinction that comes in my mind. Empathy gets more at my heart, because I know this person's hurting, and I've hurt like that. And so I try to identify with them. And when you put good listening and empathy together, when you marry those together and you mesh those together, you're creating relationship. And most often, when someone has a problem, somebody has to go to someone like Lonnie or another professional counselor, someone's life is falling apart, it's because relationships in their lives are falling apart. With a spouse, with a parent, with a child, with neighbors, with the church, on and on the list can go. My relationships are not working. My relationships are falling apart. And so we're trying to build our relationship with that person because they've trusted us enough with these deeply painful things. And they've trusted us enough, and so we're trying to build that relationship so they can begin from that point to build more relationships from that point, forward. Think about David and Nathan for just a second. After David had committed his awful sin of adultery with Bathsheba, arranged for the murder of Uriah, Bathsheba's husband, then married her, very quickly, and just kind of swept everything under the rug and tried to pretend like everything was like as normal and nothing bad had happened and nothing was wrong with what had happened. God sends Nathan to David. And how is it that Nathan could go to David, the king, and at that point in time, one of the most powerful men, if not the most powerful men in the world, a man that he knows has already arranged to have another man assassinated, a man who could easily do that again. How can Nathan go to him, tell him the parable of the neighbor and the sheep? How can Nathan go to him and do that and then confrontationally say, "You are the man"? Because they had relationship with one another. David had listened to him before. David knew that Nathan had had empathy with him before, and he knew at this moment that he was empathizing with him to the point that he was trying to bring his life back to where it belonged rather than this far-fetched, far-out, sinful disguise and fraud that he was pretending to be. And because of that relationship that was there, Nathan could say the things that he did. And sometimes, there are people that we see what their problem is, and maybe to most of the world it's kind of obvious what their problem is. And we just kind of want to marshal out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's what you need to do, and you're stupid if you don't do it, and you've been stupid the whole time because you haven't done it. And we just want to pound them in the ground. And we do that with no prior relationship. We haven't listened. We haven't empathized. We haven't really shown we care. We think we are showing we care when we go and we pound on them. But notice Nathan didn't walk into David and the first thing say, "David, you are the man." What's the first thing he did? He told the parable, didn't he? He set up and reminded David of the relationship that they had with one another. And there was a mutual respect. And we lose people when we think that we, again, going back to what I said earlier, we know all the answers. And we know your answers. And it's so obvious, why don't you see them? And to a certain degree, I guess on a technical level, sometimes that may be true, but we're not going to win friends and influence people, and we're not going to help people when we just go in and we pound them with their problem. They already know what their problem is, okay? They already know about their problem. We're not revealing something to them that they're not aware of. They just don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to get out of it. And they desperately need someone to listen to them just to know that somebody else cares. And when we look at Jesus, let's change gears slightly here. And let's think a little bit about Jesus as a counselor in that sense. He's called that, Isaiah 9:6 and following, that he's wonderful counselor and so on. But let's just see, how did Jesus deal with people? And if we can see how Jesus dealt with people, hopefully we can take some of that. I know he was perfect. John 2, he knew what was in man, so man didn't have to reveal anything to him. But if we can see how Jesus dealt with people, hopefully we can use some of that in our own dealing with people to strengthen them and to share some wisdom with them and hopefully make their lives a little better. Number one, Jesus dealt with people in a variety of styles. He had a variety of methodologies and a variety of ways. To some he talked to some he listened to some he told the stories, like Nathan did with David. To some he told the parables and so on. Remember the man comes up and says, "Hey, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." And Jesus is very direct, and he says, I'm not an arbitrator. I'm not the judge or anything like that. But then what did he immediately do? He tells a parable. He tells a story to illustrate, this is what I'm trying to tell you. And he gives him the word picture. To some people, he was very directive, and he told them, some things that they specifically needed to do in their lives and with their lives. Matthew 19. You remember there was a man that when you put all the accounts together from Matthew, Mark, and Luke, he was a rich young ruler. And he came to Jesus and he wanted to know what he needed to do. And Jesus, tells him to keep the commandments. And the young man, still very exemplary. I have no reason to doubt that he's being truthful here. He says, I've kept all of these from my youth up. Which one? Well, he says which ones first, and then Jesus lists them. And he's pretty much listing the 10 commandments there. But if you read through the parallel accounts of that, you'll notice Jesus leaves one of those out. The one he leaves out is what? Thou shalt not covet. Because what was the young man's problem? He was covetous. Jesus knew just telling him directly, well, you see, man, your problem is you're covetous, probably wouldn't have been very effective. But as he's ticking down the list of the 10 commandments, because I think this young man was probably very well versed in the scriptures, and I think he's being authentic when he says, I'm keeping the commandments. I don't have any reason to doubt, that he was a pretty good guy, a pretty righteous man in many respects. But he's probably saying those as Jesus is ticking them off as well and saying them. And the unspoken one, the one that Jesus didn't say, the one that he didn't say, deep down, what did he know? There's a problem. But rather than Jesus saying, there's your problem, Jesus was, again, these different methodologies. To some he told parables, to some he listened, to some he talked, Some he was very directed with. What did he say? Okay, here's what you need to do if you want to follow me. Go sell all that you have, give it to the poor, you have treasure in heaven, and follow me. He told him what to do, but he left the choice of doing it with him. And that's, where we got to leave it. And sadly, the man made the bad choice, didn't he? Made the wrong choice because it said he went away. And so sometimes we'll see that there's not a one-size-fits-all methodology that we can use, because Jesus used very different methods with a lot of different people. Secondly, Jesus related to people where they were. We've got to do that. Sometimes it's challenging, but Jesus related to people where they were. John chapter 4, the woman at the well, he met her where she was. And she had a lot of trauma, she had a lot of baggage, she had a lot of background, but he met her where she was. John chapter 8 that we referred to a moment ago, the woman who was caught in the act of adultery and brought to Jesus, he met her where she was. She obviously had a lot of issues to deal with, and there was a lot of things that needed to be worked through, and there were a lot of spiritual issues that needed to be measured and taken into consideration. But he met her where she was. You know, ideally, in situations like that, we would like to meet people where they're supposed to be. But that's not possible, is it? And so we have to meet them where they are. And you know, if we think we want to meet people to where they're supposed to be, they're not ready for that yet. They're not there yet. There are things they've got to deal with before they can really begin marching forward to that path. And so we've got to be willing to meet people and relate to them where they are and under the circumstances where they are at that moment. We hope they don't stay there. That's our desire. But we want to help them move forward. Third, Jesus was willing to listen and to understand. This idea that I talked about a moment ago of listening and empathy. Jesus was willing to listen to people, and he had empathy with people. That doesn't mean he condoned everything that everybody said or he condoned everything that everybody did. That doesn't mean that he agreed with everything that everybody said. But he was a listener with compassion, and he had great empathy. John 11, Martha and Mary both come up to Jesus separately, but they both come up to Jesus, and this is after Lazarus has died, and they both come up to Jesus separately, and what's the first thing they say to Jesus? If you had been here, our brother wouldn't have died. Wow. Talk about taking a 2x4 and smacking you right between the eyes. Jesus, this is your fault. Because if you had been here, this wouldn't have happened. That's essentially what they're saying. Jesus does not come down on them for saying that, does he? Because he knows, well, that was Martha's voice, that was Mary's voice. But who was really talking there? Grief. Grief was talking. And grief says a lot of things that maybe later would be regretted. Grief says a lot of things that maybe aren't true. Grief says a lot of things that maybe shouldn't be said. But when we are dealing with these emotions, and like Lonnie has pointed out, you know, if we have emotions, you know, feelings and so on, they're from God, so they're valid. But it's just kind of how we express them sometimes that maybe can be problematic. But grief will say things sometimes that is very difficult. But Jesus stood there and he listened. He talked to them as well, but he didn't, at that moment, he didn't say, now Martha, Mary, you shouldn't have said that. I can't believe you said that. That was wrong for you to say that. See, we've got to meet people where they are. We've got to listen to them with empathy and compassion and understand the circumstances that they find themselves in at that moment. And maybe that's why they said what they said, or they said it the way they said it. Again, that doesn't mean we condone everything, that we even agree with everything, but we let, what do we say? Talking. We let the person talk. And sometimes the best definition of listening is not talking. I'm not talking. I'm trying to encourage that person to talk because they need to get those feelings out. They need to divest themselves of that so you can then begin to make some progress, hopefully from there. Next was about number 4. Jesus did not force solutions on people prematurely. Again, you know, we can objectively see, oh, this is the problem, and here's 1, 2, 3, what you ought to do. But Jesus did not force those solutions on people prematurely. Jesus let people hear and understand and think about it so they could reach their own conclusions and that they could move forward themselves in that way. I mean, you take like God dealing with David, going back to the story there in 2 Samuel, God dealing with David. It was obviously a good span of time. I mean, you know, once David committed adultery with Bathsheba, you know, God could have sent Nathan the next day and said, okay, we got to deal with this. But God let that situation play itself out over a long period of time, didn't it? Until he finally knew that he needed to. This was the appropriate time to do this. Next was this number 5. Jesus became personally involved with people. Now, this is risky, very risky. But Jesus was willing to become personally involved with people. In Luke chapter 19, he's walking down the road, and he sees a man named Zacchaeus up in a tree, and what does he say to him? Hey, come down out of that tree. I need to go to your house, and we need to have lunch together. We need to dine together. And so he wanted to be personally involved in Zacchaeus' life and meet Zacchaeus on his own turf, because that's where people are most likely to be the most comfortable. And so he met him in a place where he would be the most comfortable. And you see that, with the woman at the well. You see that with a lot of other situations also. Number 6, Jesus was compassionate and had great compassion for people's needs. We've already illustrated that, I think, a lot with some other things we've said without making a whole lot more comment. Number 7, Jesus gave worth to the individual. Because oftentimes, and Lonnie's pointed this out a few times already, oftentimes when people are going through these traumas and they've had these things happen to them in their background, sometimes undescribable, terrible things that have happened to them, and they've been mistreated, abused, on and on we can go with lists of terrible things. And people feel worthless because of that. And people feel like that was my fault. When I got abused, when I had this thing happen to me, or the way my parents treated me, or the way my stepdad treated me, or the way my teacher treated me, or on and on we can go with that list. That was my fault. I did something, or I deserved that because I did something bad, or I said something I shouldn't have said. And so these people have this feeling of worthlessness. And their value is, and their self-esteem and their ego is just bottomed out. How do you think that woman in John 8 felt when those men thrust her in Jesus' presence and said, "We caught her in the very act of adultery"? How do you think she felt? And how do you think she felt even before that? With the choices she had made. And you just begin this vicious cycle of how those choices just kind of roll on, and it picks up speed as it rolls. And the more worthless you feel, the more badly you behave, and the more badly you behave, the more worthless you feel, and it just keeps going. And Jesus met her with great compassion. And once all those folks left, and he dealt with that on that level, he said, "Where are your accusers?" And remember, she said what? "There's no one else here." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." Compassion and direction. Here was a woman who felt like she was worthless, who felt like she was getting what she deserved probably by those cruel and vicious men. And Jesus says what? "I'm not going to condemn you, but go and sin no more." Change your life. That was compassion. That was tremendous compassion. And how beautiful it is, by giving her worth, a worth that she had not felt, and no telling how long, no telling how many people had told her how little value she really was. And so he gave worth to her as an individual, because God made her. Jesus was God. He made her. He knew how valuable she really was. And he communicated that to her. And we need to remind people of how valuable they are. And we need to give worth to people. Because, people have been beat up a lot in this world in bad situations and so on. And homes that have been broken and families that have been left by a wayward parent. They feel awful. And we just need to remind them of how valuable they really are, how special in the sight of God and the sight of us they really are, how special in the sight of Jesus they really are. I know that was the second bell, but just very quickly, let me close out with just one last little thing. In John 5, there is a lame man there who's by the pool of Bethesda. And he's waiting there to be healed. That doesn't happen. And Jesus asks him a pretty interesting question. John 5, this is about verse 6 or 7, I think. Jesus says, do you want to be well? Do you want to be healed? That is the superlative of all questions that we need to ask ourselves and that we need to help ask other people, because when they're having problems and they're distressed and they're having all these troubles and their life is falling apart, they don't think they can put it back together and it's in a shambles, and they've threatened many things and they've said many things and thought many things, and they're not feeling the value of the love of God. Can we help them be well? Can we approach them first of all and say, do you want to be well? Do you want to be well? Or, what's the alternative? You stay here paralyzed like that lame man. So do you want to be well? And that guy's response was, sure, yeah, I'd like that. But what did he say? No one's ever helped me. No one's ever helped me to try to be well. We can help them like Jesus did. I wanted to have a little time to give y'all some questions at the end, but maybe I'm thankful we didn't. But anyway, Lonnie will be back next Wednesday, Lord willing, and he'll try to clean up my mess. But I hope in looking at some of the things how Jesus dealt with people, it will help us how you and I deal with people.
Good evening. Our invitation song tonight will be number 859. 859. Before our devotional, we'll sing number 684. 684. This world is not my home, I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what can I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. They're all expecting me, and that's one thing I know. My Savior pardoned me, and now I onward go. I know He'll take me through, though I am weak and poor, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Just up in glory land we'll live eternally. The saints on every hand are shouting victory. Their songs of sweetest praise drift back from heaven's shore, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore.
If you were in the auditorium this last hour, we talked about a lot about how Jesus dealt with people, and a lot of people that Jesus dealt with had problems. Of course, no one was perfect in the sinless sense, but a lot of people that Jesus had to deal with, whether indirectly or in confronting them or listening to the issues that they had. Jesus had to deal with them in a very unique way, because everyone's situation, of course, was unique to that individual. When you go back in the book of Matthew to chapter 4, you see the beginning of Jesus' ministry after his temptation in the wilderness, and he has called the initial disciples. And there in verse 23 it says, he went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction among the people. So his fame spread throughout all Syria, and they brought him all the sick, those afflicted with various diseases and pains, those oppressed by demons, epileptics, and paralytics, and he healed them. And great crowds followed him from Galilee and the Decapolis, and from Jerusalem and Judea, and from beyond the Jordan. The reason they did that, we see Jesus healed people of many physical ailments, but not only was he healing them, what did we also read? He was preaching the gospel of the kingdom. The word gospel, as we well know probably, means good news. And when we think about some of the things, if you were in the auditorium tonight, that we were thinking about how Jesus dealt with people, and we read this text, we see that Jesus went about giving people hope and encouragement. And you see that when you read the text we did at the end of Matthew chapter 4 a moment ago. He gave people hope and encouragement. And Jesus still wants to give all mankind hope and encouragement. That hope is the salvation from sin. That encouragement is the home with Him in heaven eternally when we obey, when we believe and we obey the gospel of the kingdom that He was preaching. That's the opportunity that we extend with the invitation tonight, the invitation of Christ of hope and encouragement. If you've lost hope and you're discouraged, come to Jesus. He can restore your hope, and he can restore your encouragement. Would you come tonight as we stand and we sing?
He did not owe iota debt I could not pay. I needed someone to wash my sins away. And now I sing a brand new song, Amazing Grace. Christ Jesus paid a debt that I could never pay. He paid that debt at Calvary. He cleansed my soul and set me free. I'm glad that Jesus did all my sins erase. I now can sing a brand new song, Amazing Grace. Christ Jesus paid a debt that I could never pay. One day he's coming back for me to live with him eternally. Won't it be glory to see him on that day? I then will sing a brand new song, Amazing Grace. Christ Jesus paid the debt that I could never pay.
Let's pray. Most holy and righteous Father in heaven, we're thankful for this day that we can gather this midweek and be uplifted, Father, by being with fellow Christians and studying your word. Father, meeting our hearts and minds, Father, I pray that you be with Christina King and Stacey Craig and Pat Mincher, Father, and Amy DeWeese and others who are going to illnesses, Father, and surgeries and procedures, and be with them in the recovery. And bless us, Father. I pray that we be lights in this dark world and find opportunities and take advantage of them and bring others to you. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Before we are dismissed this evening, we do have some closing announcements. First, on our prayer list, we do have several. Christina King, who is Larry King's aunt, has been hospitalized with a major infection in her legs that is not healing due to diabetes. They have talked of amputating one leg, but she has opted to go home for now. Hospice may be the best option. Donna Gentis, who is Rachel Guess's mom, fell and has a brain bleed, and hospice has been called in, so please remember Alan and the Gentis family. Stacy Craig had a procedure on her back a few weeks ago that failed. She will be going in for a third attempt on Monday. If this one fails, she will have to have a more extensive surgery. And then finally, Pat Mincher fell today and is at Crestwood Hospital. The CT scan came out okay, but they are running many other tests. So please remember all of these that are on our prayer lists and any others that may be in the bulletin. For announcements, the Old Goats will meet tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. in the fellowship hall. The ladies' class will not meet tomorrow. Our annual church picnic will be on Sunday, April the 27th, starting at 12:30 at Sharon Johnston Park. There will be no PM assembly here. We will have a Devo at the park. Please see the church picnic flyer for more information on that. Girls' Day is coming up. Register by this Friday, April the 19th, to get a free Girls' Day t-shirt. You can register by scanning the QR code on the flyer or going to the Meridianville Church of Christ website. For our youth, the RCYC retreat will be April the 25th through the 27th at Camp Naoti. Cost is $50. Sign up outside of Matthew's office by tonight if you plan on going to that. The junior and senior high devotional will be this Sunday, April the 20th at the building. There will be a taco bar for dinner. Please bring a drink or dessert. And then also for this evening, we do have Lads to Leaders coming up this weekend and several kids involved in that. It says, please stay and watch the Lads to Leaders puppet shows tonight after services over here in the large auditorium. We have 2 puppet shows this year, the younger group and the older group, and they've all been working very hard. Light snacks will be provided. This will be their dress rehearsal before going to the convention. But before you are dismissed to do that, the Lads to Leaders storyline video is going to be shown. I believe they've got that pulled up.
We've been through some real adventures, haven't we? Who ever believed that we'd be right back here where we belong, in Andy's room?
Ages 3 and up. It says it on my box. Ages 3 and up.
What you got there, Buzz?
It's a Bible.
So, how long has that thing been here for?
Well, I'm not sure about this copy, but the Bible's been around a long time. Its author is God, and he's been around, well, forever. He has no beginning and no end. He is infinity and beyond.
So, what's it about?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm only in the first part, but it's called Genesis, and it's got this guy named Joseph in it, and he's younger than all of his brothers. And they kind of feel like everything was just better before he came along. His father made him a special coat, and he's a really big deal to his dad, Jacob, and so his brothers kind of hate him for it.
That reminds me of all of us when Andy first got you.
Did you hate me?
Well, I wouldn't say that, but you remember how it was between us. You are a toy! You are a child's plaything!
You are a sad, strange little man.
That's not flying. That's falling with style. Well, good riddance, you loony. Look, I misjudged you, Buzz. I was just a little jealous.
Well, so were Joseph's brothers.
Here comes that dreamer again.
Oh no, let's kill him while we have the chance. Well, I don't want to get in trouble for killing anybody. Let's throw him in a pit so he can die on his own.
Let's sell him. That way, we'll be rid of him and we'll be rich.
Yeah!
That's terrible.
Well, it's what they ended up doing. Throwing their own brother into a pit and selling him into slavery.
Look, Buzz, I didn't mean for you to fall out of the window to the ground, but I did mean to get you out of the way.
What?
Buzz! Buzz Lightyear! We got trouble. Down there. Just down there. Look, it's a toy. It's a helpless toy. It's trapped, Buzz.
And we've got no time to lose. Wow, that was rough. I almost forgot about that.
I remember Humpty Dumpty was pushed by Woody.
Come on. You don't really think I meant to do that, do you? Potato Head?
That's Mr. Potato Head to you.
Come on, Buzz. You know I wouldn't do that now.
Of course. I mean, I almost forgot. But it's like Joseph did forget. He forgave his brothers.
For throwing him into a pit?
For everything. Years later, they ran into Joseph again. By now, he was very high in position of command in Egypt. He was second only to the king.
Well, that's how I felt about you.
Well, Joseph's brothers were very afraid that he would take revenge on them. Revenge is not something we practice on my planet.
Oh, well that's good.
But we're not on my planet, are we? Yeah, that didn't really get us anywhere.
What are you looking at, you hockey puck?
Nope, not helpful at all.
Revenge never is. That's why Joseph said.
Don't worry about what you did. God brought me here to save your people and to save your family. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good.
I think I like that book.
I think everyone should. You know, Woody, we're just toys, just a child's plaything.
Yeah, but you're a cool toy. Your helmet does that whoosh thing.
Yeah, but I'm still just a toy. This is a real book. There are real people in real trouble because there's a real enemy out there.
So you mean like there's a snake in my boot?
Exactly. There's always that serpent, that sneaky snake. He tricked Eve in the garden and he's been tricking people ever since.
Someone's poisoned the water hole.
Pretty much. But remember, while the devil means to trick people, God has a plan for everyone who obeys him, that he will save them. The devil means it for evil.
But God means it for good.
So again, we are dismissed, and please come and watch the puppet shows if you have the time so these kids can have a good audience. We are dismissed. Thank you.